We're going to go ahead and start. One of the things that I wanted to say before actually launching into a deeper conversation about our reopening plans is, we had a very exciting evening on August the 6th. We provided the community with pretty detailed information around our reopening recommendation to the school committee in terms of really looking at a phased-in approach to reopening our schools. The school committee did vote on Thursday evening, 7-0, to start with a bridge to hybrid, and that bridge being really a way to ensure that when we enter into our schools that we're fully and completely prepared, giving us either a month or two, at least 2 months, a month at elementary, 2 months at secondary to ensure that our remote learning plan is solid before we start moving into that hybrid model. So since then, we have spent some time sitting with the decision and continuing to refine our plan, knowing that it might take a little while. Kathy, you're crooked. Might take us a little while to fully flesh out all of the details, but at least with the decision, we do know what we're headed for in terms of the fall. So this evening, what I want to do is I would like to go over an abbreviated version of the slides. And yes, I do acknowledge that probably the 105 of you that are out there right now may have sat in on the school committee meeting, but that's not necessarily a guarantee. And so what I thought I would do is, again, take an abbreviated slide deck and go through the reopening plan. And what I have done is I've highlighted along the way, and you'll see as when I open up the slides, areas that several questions emerged while we were in the school committee meeting that may not have been addressed. So I've highlighted areas within the slide deck that they're going to be purple, and I'm going to take a moment and stop at those places and answer questions that I had seen from August the 6th regarding the reopening plan. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood that we ended the evening on the 6th, that we would start with answering some of the questions that remained, and that's how I'm going to approach that as well. And I know that obviously there are three, highly impacted groups here. When all is said and done, we have our teachers, whose lives obviously are very much impacted by the reopening plan. We have our families, again, whose lives are very much impacted by the reopening plan, and certainly our students. And along the way, we're going to talk about how it is that we're going to work very hard to ensure that our students continue to make our entire year's worth of growth as we start our fall reopening plan. For our faculty members, I have scheduled an additional educator forum next Thursday. I know there's very specific questions around personnel, and that is a time that we will just focus on educators. And I know that even this evening, if you have questions, that's fine, but I wanted to make sure that our educators know that you will have a forum that is just specifically about personnel related issues and being a teacher in Watertown. And then for the families, we will continue to provide weekly forums up until the start of school. So I think they're not always on a Tuesday, but that schedule is something that's publicly available. And if you wish to continue to join and ask questions along the way, once a week at least, we will have community forums led by me and our principals, who are not here this evening. Actually, we are here as a central office administrative team, but our principals will be holding chats in their individual buildings in the coming weeks as well, just to keep our community informed. So that is just a little overlay of the land. So in terms of format, let me just, like I said, let me walk through the slides. I know that there are Q&A already in there. Kathy is going to answer as many questions in the Q&A as possible. But at the end of the slideshow, what we're going to do is go with the format of, if people want to raise their hands, we'll acknowledge the attendees that are raising their hands. And then I'll have Kathy summarize some of the themes in the questions and answers and try to answer them as well as we can. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And like I said, it will not, whoops, let's look at my beautiful emails. I promise it will not be as long as the school committee presentation, but I do want to just pop through some things. So as you can see from the format, you'll find areas there that are purple, and those are the areas that I'm going to, sorry, done, hit the wrong button. Those are the areas that I'm going to kind of stop, pause, and go a little bit in depth because there were lots of questions along the way regarding the items in purple. So we discussed on Thursday night, and we sent out an executive summary of what we are calling the Bridge to Hybrid plan. So we want to make sure that we are ensuring a thoughtful and safe return. And one of the things that we are going to be using to, ensure that when we're ready to move into hybrid, because we know that at some point we will be moving into hybrid, or at some point hopefully full in-person learning, that we'll be looking at current data and state metrics. So there were a lot of questions in the chat around state metrics, and as we said on Thursday evening, those actually were not available. They had not been provided by the state. Today, there was a press release or a press conference with the governor. He did review some of the state metrics. They are going to be sent to districts either later on this evening or in the coming days. And that is something that we will work with our Board of Health to determine, how do we rely on these state metrics? How much information are they giving us? And how will we use them in terms of making decisions about, starting back into a hybrid mode? So that's important to note that, yes, the state metrics are becoming available. They were, again, launched today, but we will get more detail in the coming days and use those metrics in terms of trying to make decisions around returning to a hybrid. I'm not going to dwell on the fact that we've purchased a lot of PPE for our staff, and that we've also purchased masks for our students, and that, whatever we do, whenever we're back, safety protocols will be our #1 most important thing in terms of establishing them and ensuring that our staff and our students are trained and understand how it is that we exist in a COVID-19 school environment. So the based reopening plan is for most students, and that was something, again, that kept coming up in the questions, will be the Watertown Bridge to Hybrid, which includes that phased in reopening plan, the ultimate goal of returning in person. I think in my slide deck, and I apologize, I had put in there all students, and I think that it's important to clarify that we are going to try to work really hard to meet the needs of our highly impacted students. And so some of them might not be starting remote. They might actually be doing a hybrid from the get-go. So, or even every day, if that's something that is warranted for each individual student's needs. So that was something I wanted to clarify in terms of some confusion. So another point that came up, remote instruction starts on September 22nd. So a lot of questions in the chat about when does school start. So the Commissioner of Education said that we as a district will have 10 additional days for our staff to train. But he did say that school had to start by September 16th. And then he followed that up with any district who really has a post-Labor Day start can apply for a waiver. So that is something that I have already done. I'm waiting to hear back on the waiver, but I have a feeling that that shouldn't be an issue. So as soon as that is approved, we'll provide the school committee with a new updated calendar and vote on the first day of school. But more than likely, it will be September 22nd, and that will be remote. For the greater majority of all of our students, we'll be starting in that remote learning plan. So a couple more items here that are in purple. So we will be providing an in-person option for some families of our students with specialized needs, including students in substantially separate programs, students who are experiencing homelessness, our newcomer ELs, and our preschool program. And I'm going to just talk about this a little bit. And I think about it as 3 tiers of support. So just because you might have an IEP or because you might be an EL doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be back in person, but it does mean that you will receive additional support and services. But we do want to focus on our students who have higher needs in terms of substantially separate program students, or our ELs that are in levels 1 and 2, which literally is beginners when it comes to English. Preschool program, I think this got a little confusing at the last presentation. Our preschool program is actually a special education program. It is designed for our students that have come out of early intervention with identified disabilities that need to be addressed at the preschool age. So that is something that is mandated and highly necessary for many of our preschool students. So when we talk about substantially separate programs, our preschool is considered to be, for the most part, a substantially separate program. And one of the goals in our preschool program is to provide an integrated preschool, which means that our preschoolers get to spend time with typically developing peers. And so right now we're trying to figure out how best to achieve both of those goals, while understanding that many of our students might be starting in that bridge to hybrid. That is not pertaining to our pre-kindergarten program, which is our tuition-based program for students who are the year before kindergarten, and that program will start as a bridge to hybrid. So that's really important, which I think I got a little missed in our presentation on Thursday. So the next area here, I want to kind of go over a little bit because I know there's a lot of questions around this. This was in the chat a lot. So we just described the bridge to hybrid, but we do know that there are students who might need to be part of a permanent, like not a permanent, because we want all of our kids back in school. So I shouldn't say permanent, that we want to have an option for students who might be immunocompromised and require remote learning. It also might be appropriate for some students who thrive in a remote learning environment, especially under the conditions that we're faced with. So we will be offering a Watertown virtual school that is actually fully remote, and it will not be something that we return into a hybrid until such point that we can reassess where we're at. And we're saying that students in that virtual school will stay there throughout the year. The program will be there. But we will stop in the middle to assess whether some families might want to move back into the hybrid model or the all in-person, depending upon the context we find ourselves in February. And I'm just going to stop for 1 second again here and explain that in the Watertown virtual school, I've called it WVS, most of our students will follow the same schedule as the bridge to hybrid, meaning yes, it's remote, all the way through the year, but the actual learning plans, the content standards, the format will be very much aligned with what our students are having in the bridge to hybrid. So whether they're remote and heading to the hybrid or whether they're in the hybrid, that virtual school will follow the same schedule as that bridge to hybrid. One thing the state just released very late last week was an asynchronous option, which is literally a fully online content delivery system where you would not follow the same schedule and you would not necessarily be with, Watertown Public Schools teachers in terms of delivering the content because the content is all online. And I know that some families have inquired as to whether or not if they have situations that make it so that they can't, be part of that same schedule as the bridge to hybrid, could they have an asynchronous option? And that is, again, something that was released by the state last week. We're exploring the options. I can't give you too many specific details right now, but that might also be available for our families. And then the big question is, when do parents need to let us know? I will be providing just a brief overview of the Watertown Virtual School, almost like a pamphlet, later on. And then we will ask you to opt in to the Watertown Virtual School by August the 21st. I would say that I know that that's a short time frame, but when all is said and done, it's about a month away from school, and that will allow us to determine how we're going to staff that remote learning option, the virtual school, and it will help us to plan better in terms of creating our cohorts in our bridge to hybrid. So if you need a little extra time, you're going to work with me directly, and we'll figure out where we go from there. But certainly, we'll send you the form by the end of this week. We'll give you the full week to consider it. And then we would ask you to opt in by August 21st. So again, I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. Most, if not all, I don't know yet. We're aiming to have some of our highest need students coming in on September 22nd. But if that's not necessarily an option at that point, we would hope so to do so within the very few days after that. But most of our students will start remotely with a robust full day learning experience. And at the school committee, we went over schedules and talked about what that day might look like. But we all have to understand that this fall reopening is not spring, and we're going to talk about that really briefly in a few minutes, but it is a full day of learning. Yes, it's not a full day in front of the Zoom screen. That is not at all what we're trying to do. But certainly we anticipate that students will be experiencing a full day's worth of learning pretty much every day because we have to meet our time on learning requirements. And that is what we're planning for and intend to deliver to all of our families in Watertown. So we talked about the 3 tiers and the fact that we're going to phase into the hybrid. So just quickly again, phase 1, before you guys even have to, if you're a family member out there, don't worry about this so much, but phase 1 is for staff. We'll be meeting both virtually and hopefully some in person, September 1st to the 16th. Staff opening day is September 1st, and then we'll spend all of the remaining days really preparing for that launch into the return to hybrid, the bridge to hybrid. Then September 17th to the 21st, while they're not technically learning days, that is when we'll be delivering all of the technology. We'll be making sure that our families are able to connect, that they understand how to access the Google Classroom and the learning plans, So that is, some pretty intense work between the 17th and the 21st. And then we head into the first full day for students will be September 22nd, again, pending that waiver. And the virtual school and the bridge to hybrid will begin remotely following the same schedules established for the hybrid. So I'm just going to take a moment here because you can see a lot of purple. And if any of my friends, my co-workers out there want to add anything here, that would be great. But this is a big question is, while we're remote, all students are going to be placed into 2 cohorts, A or B, which is the same thing that we will do in our bridge to hybrid, meaning, if you're in cohort A and we start remote, when we head into the hybrid, you will still be in cohort A. And there was a lot of, and I know there's a lot of discussion and debate whether we should be creating these cohorts right out of the get-go for the remote learning. And I'm going to tell you the 3 main reasons why, and there are others as well, but cohorts will be the same in the hybrid learning environment. So it's a seamless transition when we finally get to the place where we're able to start in the hybrid. There'll be no changes. The students will be with their same peers. So it's just a really easy, natural transition. Starting with the cohorts allows for more personalized small group instruction. This is key. We learned this from our surveys. We learned it from talking to our students, especially our elementary students, about how much they preferred being in their smaller groups, learning with a smaller group of kids, because it allowed them to focus on what was being taught and internalize the learning. And we can't do that if we don't break kids up into cohorts in a way that's meaningful and allows for that deeply personalized learning. And as I mentioned, it's a seamless transition into the hybrid. Elementary and middle school will begin the week with both cohorts together on Mondays. Again, this is something that came up in the chat, and it's something that I don't think we necessarily explained. But on Mondays, although you're in cohorts A and B, we're going to bring all the kids in a class together. So if there's 10 kids in cohort A and 10 in cohort B, there'll be 20 together on Mondays to kick off the week, to get some, really firm understanding of where we're headed, what the objectives are, what the week is going to look like, what the big projects might be, start the instruction and have the kids get to know each other, because, sooner or later we will come back in person. So there'll be that really important socialization aspect as well. But then they will break up into their cohorts for the remaining days of the week. Okay, and then the opposite days, when they're not in the core academics, that's when they will receive their specials and other opportunities for lunch bunches, social interactions, free play. That's one of the things that we're trying to figure out how to build that in on those days. But that's what will happen on the off days. And then the high school will follow their 7-period schedule split over 2 days. So if you're a high school family, Mondays you would go to your A block, B block, C block, and D block. And then Tuesdays you would go to your E block, your F block, your G block, and then an advisory. And that will repeat on Wednesday and Thursday. And then Friday is an asynchronous applied learning day, where students will wrap up the week and turn in their major assignments that we do every Friday. And then again, a couple of really important points here. When we try to figure out when we're ready to go into hybrid, the first benchmark will be on October 22nd, where we will examine the state metrics. We'll look and see how Watertown is doing. And then we will determine if it's possible for an elementary return. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education actually has elementary as one of the high needs groups, but they say in the beginning to prioritize the ones above the elementary return, but it is still something that we acknowledge fully that we would like to be able to do more in-person learning for our elementary students. So the first day back for our elementaries could be October 27th, and then November 25th would be the second benchmark. If we didn't bring our elementaries in, we would look again on November 25th. But for our middle school, high school, that would be when we consider moving into the hybrid. And that's a natural break because it's the end of the first quarter. And then, I think I already discussed this. Ideally, at some point, this will be phase 5, where we're back to, I'm sure it will be a new normal, but certainly more normal than what we're talking about right now. I don't need to go over this again. This is just that comparison chart between spring of 2020, which is when we flipped the switch and we all went remote, to fall of 2020, which is now doing a full year's worth of school in our, both hybrid, remote environments. So I just want to highlight a few things here that are in pink again. There were a lot of questions in the Q&A around consistent platforms. So we are committed as a district to use Google Classroom in grades 3 through 12. For our content delivery system. and Seesaw, which is another program, a learning management system for pre-K through 2, so preschool through 2. And then another area here I wanted to highlight in purple is Zoom. So a lot of questions in the Q&A about how much screen time is too much screen time. And in that conversation, I know, and I want to make sure people understand that we do not anticipate, even at the high school level, that students will be in front of a full class Zoom lesson for hours on end. That is not our goal. We know that is not the best way to do this. So there'll be some intermittent work where it's, you might have a 15-minute mini lesson in Zoom, and then you break up your students into smaller groups on Zoom, or maybe they just log out of Zoom and do, sample problems or do some of the work and then come back together to review. So I want to assure people that it is not meant to be 4 hours of Zoom. And we certainly are going to work on as much as we can, project-based learning opportunities for lesson extensions that are not, driven by the screen to ensure that our students are moving along in the curriculum. So, another thing, a lot of people talked about building relationships. How are our staff and our students going to be able to build a relationship together? I was very buoyed by an email that I received from one of our teachers who's in an actual virtual summer program, who really spoke to the fact that now that we have the opportunity to, start the year, we will have to build those relationships. And there are some great strategies for doing that. But certainly that is the most important thing when we start back again. In whichever way we end up heading, in terms of, obviously remote to begin, but then even when we end up in the hybrids, that those strong relationships are the key, and we will have to do whatever we can to get that set up and moving for our students to engage well and be part of that larger learning community that we want for all of our kids. Another big question in the Q&A was around collecting and assessing assignments. And we used the word grades, and that is what the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has said. We need to grade students, but I would say, for those of us who have children in our schools, grading sometimes can be traditional, but oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes it's standards-based, especially at the elementary level. It's project-based in terms of rubric-driven and setting benchmarks for kids and providing formative assessment feedback along the way. And so we will mirror a lot of the ideas around, a high emphasis on formative assessment. And also, yes, we will have to do summative assessment at the end of a project or a term or whatever it might be to determine how students are doing. But we will be increasing the amount of feedback and providing students with, grading. Again, not necessarily always A, B, C, D, F, but certainly standards-based, rubric-driven, benchmarks and formative assessment are going to be part of this along the way. And I talked about early education and the difference between preschool and pre-K, and then we talked about Google Classroom. So I'm just going to shift really quickly, and then I'm getting close to the end, I promise. A few of the safety precautions, again, this is all based off of the Q&A that I read, thoroughly afterwards. There were about 450 questions, and I think that 300 of them were answered. So, but there were many that weren't, and that's why I want to take a little bit of time here. There's a lot of concern about HVAC systems, and rightfully so. I mean, it's something that has been in the news. I would like to say that our school department, as well as the town, we have our Department of Public Buildings who have completely systematized our approach to maintenance, preventative maintenance, making sure that we're doing regular, consistent checks of all of our HVAC systems. Obviously our crew are on the roof, they're checking our fans. But I wanted to make sure that in addition to the fact that I'm, very confident around our crew that we have here in Watertown, we have contracted with AI3, which is our architect who is helping us to build our elementary schools and our high school. They have an environmental engineering partner who will be coming in to review our HVAC systems and make recommendations on ways to improve air exchange with our existing HVAC systems. So that's really, really essential, and that work will be done obviously before we ever consider moving into a hybrid. And all of the recommendations will be taken to our Buildings and Grounds Subcommittee for further discussion and determine our next steps with that. As I mentioned, we have air purifiers. Certainly we'll be using those in rooms that might have less than windows, or might not have as many windows, or questionable ventilation. So that's one layer that we can do. Windows are checked. And I want to make sure that people know that our HVAC systems follow the preventative maintenance plan. and is completely in keeping with the CDC guidelines and the ASHRAE guidelines. And if you really want to look at detailed guidelines around HVAC, it's the ASHRAE guidelines, and that's what's driving a lot of those consultations that we'll be doing to make sure that we're completely in line with what needs to be done for our buildings. I think we're all pretty good with the fact that we'll be setting up our classrooms to maintain 6 feet of distance once we're able to move back into hybrid. Cleaning, we have a very detailed custodial response plan for cleaning, which includes, everyday cleaning, and we're going to be moving our custodial staff into shifts that have them in the buildings when students are in the buildings more, so that's really important. And as I said before, we're working on testing for our staff, and certainly even exploring options for, voluntary testing for students as well. And the state has really established a lot of people, not so much in the Q&A from the school committee meeting, but what happens if somebody were to get COVID-19. The state has provided very detailed protocols for what to do in the event of somebody having COVID-19. And again, it's ideally, you keep your students in cohorts, and you move forward and follow the guidelines. But as I said at the school committee meeting, we don't step in any way until we speak with our Board of Health here in Watertown, who is directly, obviously, connected with the Department of Public Health. And all decisions are based on a consultation with those two very important bodies in terms of what we should do here in Watertown. And then, we have PPE. I don't need to go over this. I think I've been over this many times, but certainly I want to assure the community that we have done our due diligence in providing PPE for staff when we are back in school. And then, next steps, we're going to continue working on our federal grants. And then sending out that information about the virtual school that will be sent out this week. And so you'll be invited to enroll. And then continued, as I said earlier, communication and engagement opportunities. So beginning next week, weekly forums and chats with principals, et cetera. So I already went over that, but I want to make sure that we'll have ample opportunities for feedback and questions and just listening to, what it is that's on the mind of our community. Don't need to go through this, but there's obviously a lot of guidance from the state. And then last but not least, at this point in time, I think I'm done moving through this. And again, I thank you for those of you who sat through the school committee meeting and already heard most of this information, but I hope that you were able to get a little bit further details based upon, again, my analysis from the questions and answers, and then, we'll move forward from here. One thing I didn't address in this, and I'm just looking at my notes, was somebody had wondered about devices. And I don't think I actually had a slide about technology devices, but we certainly we are committed to being a one-to-one Chromebook community for students in grades 1 through 12. At this point, we are not necessarily providing a device for kindergarten, but we do have iPads that we're considering how best to use those for kindergarten. But 1 through 12 Chromebooks. And if you've heard in the news, yes, it is true that there are some issues getting some Chromebooks into the United States, but we are able to provide those from day one based on the refresh of our grade 8 and our grade 12 students. And then once our new Chromebooks come in, which will be for grades 1 and 2, we'll distribute those as soon as possible. But from the get-go, every student in grades 1 through 12 will have a Chromebook, which we're going to distribute in September if you don't already have it. So that was important. And any family whatsoever that might not have connectivity in their homes, we will work with every family to ensure that we distribute hotspots and make sure that people have no barriers in terms of internet access to be able to participate fully in our educational program. And also this came up, I think in the Q&A, but certainly along the way is, providing ample opportunities for families, whether it be actually in our tents to get some help, some tech support, or online with drop-ins. We did that very successfully in the spring, but we will absolutely continue doing that for families and students who maybe at 7 o'clock at night, you get stuck and you don't know what to do. Hopefully we'll be able to have a place where you can get some answers along the way. So that was not in the PowerPoint, but I wanted to make sure that I touched on that as well. So wrapping up, sorry, I hear Teresa. Yeah, wrapping up.
Just wanted to answer that kindergarten question about technology. I know that we ordered some touchscreen Chromebooks, but they're not in yet, but that's one area also that we want to help with.
Yep, so the grades 1 and 2 will get the touchscreen Chromebooks. And, you know, that's why we're trying to figure out with the iPads maybe for kindergarten, but we believe, and we looked, our task force really discussed whether touchbook Chromebooks or regular Chromebooks would be better, and we went with the touch screen Chromebooks for grades 1 and 2. Okay, so I'm going to take a little deep breath, and then we're going to move on. I don't know if anybody else here wants to add anything before we head into the questions and answers. Let me look at the participants. We have 2 people with their hands up. So Kathy, do you want me to start with the hands up?
Yeah, why don't you start with the hands up, because I have questions that I've been saving that I'll ask, so they're in line already. So let's start there.
And please note that every time we meet, I end up with a few more answers to questions, but I'm here to tell you there might be questions that I still don't have specific answers to. But as we get closer to the beginning of school, we will have, you know, all the questions answered that we can. And then as things arise, as we move through this journey, we will be able to provide more information as well. So Heather, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Heather McManus.
Yeah, hi. First, I just wanted to say that I've been incredibly impressed with how everything has been handled and how adaptive the Watertown School District has been. My question is specifically towards kindergarten, and it may be a very naive question. There are a lot of parents concerned about the length of the remote day, and there's actually several people who are talking about unenrolling for K because of that concern, and I know we'll be getting more information. I'm just wondering if it's at all possible to pivot to a half-day kindergarten program, since full day is not mandatory in the state of Massachusetts.
So thank you for that question. And that's something that we certainly can move forward and consider. I would just like to mention that, you know, prior to like 2 weeks ago, it seems like an eternity ago, one of the things that we had proposed was half-day kindergarten every day when the rest of the students were in a hybrid, because of that very point that you just brought up, the developmentally appropriateness of, you know, an extended time period, either via Zoom or whatever it might be. But then we moved back to, you know, away from those half days and then full day every other day, full day meaning the 4 hours, because we thought we were heading into a hybrid and we didn't think that we could really effectively do an AM and a PM kindergarten. But I hear what you're saying, and that is certainly something that we can, you know, follow up on and speak with the larger team and see if that's something that might not be a different way to approach kindergarten. But I can tell you that our kindergarten teachers certainly are aware of the developmental challenges of an online environment for kindergarten. I know Dr. McGinnis might want to add to that because she was a part of the kindergarten summit. So
yeah, may I share, Dee Dee, here for a second?
I think you can, yes, look at that.
Folks can see. So this is a draft, just so you know, not out there yet, but our kindergarten teachers have been on this. They're fantastic. And they have been meeting with the principals weekly for the last 2 or 3 weeks in a row as we go through the schedule and think through this. As you know, 2 weeks ago when we first presented, Dr. Galston showed the 2-hour blocks of kindergarten. We gathered feedback from staff and from the parent forum, and we shifted. So if you look at my screen right now, you can see here that social emotional support and wellness of our kindergartens and all our students is critical. And so in the morning, kindergartners start from the minute 5 essentially until 8:35 with social emotional wellness and support. So it's not academic, but it's hugely important. At 8:35, they move to phonics. And again, these 2 columns represent the hybrid in person when we get to that, and then the hybrid remote. So for the purposes of now, maybe this would be helpful just to look at the one that I have highlighted here, blue, because we're going to start remote, as Dr. Galston pointed out. So after, from 8:35 to 9, they do some phonics work. Then they take a break. So remotely, there may be an instructional assistant that leads a play group, a snack chat, because what we heard from parents and certainly teachers and our student survey, although kindergartners was not, it was a qualitative survey versus a quantitative one, but that they need time together to socialize, and they wanted us to include more of that time in the schedule. So what you can see here from 9 to 9:30 serves that purpose. And if we were in person, that would be snack or outside play, just to give you an example. From 9:30 to 10, read aloud, reading or writing mini lesson, and then some sort of assignment. And these are just examples. 10 to 10:30 is the work session. All students work on the assignment that's given by the teacher. They have help with an instructional assistant in the room or virtually, so that we can break groups, as Dr. Galton said, into smaller groups. So if there are up to 10 students in a cohort A, for example, if we have an instructional assistant and a teacher, we're down to, if it's 8 to 10 students, we're down to 4 to 5 students in a small group. So you can really hone the individualizing and personalizing with the student. 10:30 to 11 is math in the hybrid, and it's a break again in the remote. I just undid this. 11 to 11:30, mini math lesson. 11:30 to 11:50, a work session, and then a closing circle at the end of the day. And again, it's a way to connect the students all together, to support their social emotional learning, to just touch base with how their day went and what their needs are, etc. So although that sounds like a long period of time, it is really scaffolded or broken down so that we can support the kids. And this schedule, which is totally draft right now, is being created by our kindergarten teachers who know full well the developmental needs of kiddos, and hear you all parents as well. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Okay. Heather, are you?
Yeah, sorry, that is helpful. It does still seem like it's an hour of instruction separated by 30-minute breaks throughout that period, which, I mean, I think 30 minutes for my son who's in summer ESY is challenging to do, sign in, meeting with phonics and a game and then goodbye. That is all he can do. And so though I know they're kindergarten teachers and they understand, it's still a lot for that age on a computer. But thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So the next person is Lindsay Sear. Lindsay, are you there?
Sorry, I didn't have a question.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're with us today. So
Thank you.
how about Jay Zeller?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, first I just want to say thank you to everyone who I can only imagine the hard work that went into developing this plan with all the different voices that you are listening to. I have a question. I have a daughter who's in elementary school, and I was wondering if there was any possibility of having live synchronous core instruction with the primary teacher all 5 days. I was a little concerned that there would be 2 days without any live core instruction with the primary teacher, especially for upper elementary school students.
So I think you ask a very good question, and I think there's I think there's two ways to look at that. Meaning, either you're live core every day for a very shorter period of time, or you're a longer period of time with half the amount of students every other day. So I see what you're saying, and I get why it would seem to be beneficial to see your core instructional teachers every day. The trade-off would be either A, you would end up with a far shorter amount of time for instruction, core instruction, or B, you would end up with 20 to 22 students on the Zooms, which makes it much harder to do the small group instruction. And then the overriding factor, I think, for us was our goal with elementary is to be at that check mark at October 22nd and see if our metrics are continuing in the positive trajectory and end up back in school. And once we end up back in school, it's going to be a hybrid, and it will still be every other day. So I think there's benefits to both of those. but that's, and when you ask like why, you know, doesn't it make more sense to have the 5 days? I don't think there's anything wrong with having 5 days, but there are trade-offs on both of those. And I think that, again, given our hope to be in on October 27th, we went with the every other day deeper learning with a smaller group of students. I don't know if Dr. McGinnis wanted to add anything to that, but.
I'm so sorry. I was writing an answer in the answer question and answers. So let me hit send.
Yeah, that's fine. It's fine. But you know, this whole point of this evening is to hear your thoughts and ideas and your feedback. And certainly we take your thoughts and feedback back to our team. But I just wanted to let you know that that was the reason why it is that we went with the 3 out of 5 days with your core instructional teacher. And those 2 days are not off days. I mean, they're pretty filled with, you know, 2 specials and FLES if you're in the FLES years. So you do end up with, you know, I think it's almost an hour and a half to 2 hours of synchronous time with your specialist teachers and your FLES teacher, right, Dr. McGinnis?
Right.
Yeah. And sorry, just to add.
Read questions and answers and let Kathy take that one. So I was going to share my screen again because folks are having some questions about the schedule, and I just was going to share.
Let me just follow up one other thing about the off days, meaning the off core days or the specialist days. Those are also our opportunities to, when I talked about the tiers of support, you know, oftentimes our students who might not need to be in, you know, for you know, intense high needs would receive their supplemental services on those days, so they don't miss core instruction whatsoever, and they're able to, you know, participate fully in the other offerings as well. So there were a lot of reasons why we went with the every other day cohort. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. McGinnis, who would like to share something.
Yeah, I'm just going to answer. There are a couple questions in. Actually, it answers the what you're talking about, but also in the chat. And this is an example of a grade 2 schedule, but it could be any grade at the elementary level. And so, you know, in class is in the first column, and then asynchronous is in the second column. Although, and so as you can see, again, morning meetings, math, snack and recess, reader's workshop, phonics or foundations, and writing, and then a closing circle. And then the afternoon is asynchronous. So it's not till 2, it's not 8 to 2. One of the parents in the chat had asked about that one. It's really 8 to 11:55 or 8:15 to 11:55, and then closing circle, and then some asynchronous work in the afternoon. On the extension day, you have, there'll be some lessons in iReady Math that they can do on their computer on their own. There's opportunities for extending the curriculum and or support and intervening. So our special ed educators might be assisting, our reading specialists might be assisting, our school psychologists might be assisting. There's opportunity for that. There's live Spanish, K through 4. That's also happening on that opposite day. There may be a special too that day, art, PE, etc. That's live. And then again in the afternoon, asynchronous science, and then drop in everything and read. So it just gives you an example of what we're working on.
I thought of something. Immediately left. Oh, and it has nothing to do with what you just said, Dr. McGinnis, but I wanted to acknowledge an idea that was in the Q&A, I believe, from the school committee meeting that somebody had brought. Oh, and actually, I think I saw it in this one too, about if you have 2 children in elementary school, would it be possible to be in opposite cohorts? So that is very interesting, and I'm going to absolutely say that I'm going to take that to the principal teams. I think it would get a little complicated if you spanned the levels. But certainly, I think, you know, at elementary, that might be something that we could consider. But I get the idea that it could be challenging if you were all in the same cohort and you had, you know, 2 or more children at elementary, that you were trying to do the core days with all of your kids. So I'm going to take that idea back to the team. Can't remember if that was today or the other day. There's a lot of Q&A in there. Liz Marino, you're next on the queue.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm wondering if you can speak more to what that potential first week of school or that roll in the week of the 16th with connecting with, teachers connecting with families, possible outdoor meetings. My rising third grader is starting to ask a lot of questions of what things might look like. And so I'm just looking to be able to start to prep her a little bit.
Right. And so that certainly, the idea of the 3 days, I would have to tell you right now, we haven't fully developed, but that would be the point, is to try to do, when you come in to get your Chromebook, if possible, meet your teachers or meet a few of your classmates to try to establish some of the connections that are so important when we actually head into the remote world. And, we're trying to figure out opportunities along the way for some of that more social interaction outdoors. Please remember, we did procure 16 tents. So, that is something that we are, now that we know we have the tents and now that we know what the plan is, we'll be working with our teachers to figure out what best we can do. So I wouldn't prep quite yet, but certainly within, I'd say, the next week, we'll have some clarity around what those first 3 days that are non-school but community building will look like.
Great. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, of course, Liz.
So there was something in the Q&A about, for families who are going to opt for virtual, that they may have classmates that span across the district. If that's the case, will there be a way for people to request to be in the same cohort if we're potting up with other families?
So that's another great, I hope somebody's taking some good notes. So we haven't yet, we have to figure out how many students we're actually going to have in the fully remote world. But I hear what you're saying. Like, if we were going to pod kids, even though I can't guarantee that there'd be like a Hosmer grade 1, it might be a district, Watertown grade 1, that at least if there were pods of kids, that they would stay within their home schools. Is that kind of what you're talking about, Liz?
I'm actually thinking something quite the opposite. So our very close friends that we would likely pod with, the kids are in the same grade, but at different schools. And so we'd likely pod up at my house, and we thought it would be, if there's the chance that grades are going to be, across schools, could we request for kids to be in the same cohort?
So that's a great idea. Thank you for bringing that up. It reminds me of when you write the letter to the principal and you talk about, these are some kids that my child gets along with really well. Same idea. We could certainly, put that, once we determine how many sections and how that's going to look. I think that's a great idea, to see if there's some preferences for people that, are looking for childcare or looking for options that, to help each other out. Yeah, I think that's certainly within the realm of possibility. Great idea.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Judy.
Yep. I'm going to do one more on the hands up, and then I'm going to go, Kathy, for some themes. Okay, that would be Erin McLaughlin.
Hi. We are coming into the Watertown Public Schools for the first time. I have a high school freshman, so I'm wondering about how she's going to get acclimated socially if we're starting fully remote.
That's great. That's a great question. So one of the things that we will be doing at the high school level is, and I don't know if you were able. I know that the new principal had a Zoom glitch and didn't have enough spaces for everybody, but I know he's going to offer some more in-depth conversations around starting at the high school. But one of the things that we will do is definitely once a week we'll be having advisory, which is grade-based, and it's an opportunity for students to break apart from their typical academic classes and come together and get to know a smaller group of kids. But above and beyond, Friday, I think especially in the beginning, there's a focus on freshmen in terms of freshmen. What is the word, Teresa? Freshmen?
I don't know what you're.
Grade 9 and grade 12, the guidance counselors are bringing the grade 9 students together to go over welcome to high school.
Orientation?
It's not just orientation. Sorry, the word escapes me.
Orientation?
It's more than orientation, because it's a longer curriculum around, being a freshman and what you should be thinking about. We do it with our students when they're in person as well, but that's certainly on the schedule. So, when we talk about Friday isn't in those blocks, there will be some synchronous time for, again, starting with freshmen and seniors, because obviously the seniors are also equally concerned about college and, what is my life looking like in terms of applications. So those two groups are going to be like the first 6 weeks, I believe, and then they'll switch into the 10 and 11 and then back to the 9 and 12. So there is a specific curriculum for our freshmen, not only to get to know Watertown, but certainly, to get to know each other and start making those bonds and friendships. But our teachers will work hard to do that too. We talk about, and I know that some people are going to bristle when I say this, but we talk about the fact the first week is not algebra. The first week is really going to be, let's get to know each other as a learning community and get to know each other as, people in the class, as opposed to, let's just hit the ground running with algebra. So we will do that. There is time for that, but more importantly is developing that community.
And also to add to that, so we've been working with 78 folks at the district level in various task force, right? But now we've shifted to school-based planning. So for example, at the high school, that orientation or whatever it's called, that DD, you're trying to remember the name of it, all of that information will be shared from the high school principal or elementary and middle school. So they can be school specific. So stay tuned. It definitely will be coming. We have an outstanding guidance department at the high school that supports our 9th graders. But
Great.
you'll get more school level detail coming from the principals in a couple of weeks.
And welcome to Watertown.
Great.
We're very excited to have you.
Thank you. We're excited.
Yeah, it's going to be great. The next person with a hand up is, whoops, I just disabled talking by accident. Okay.
You were going to turn it over to me.
I was going to turn it over to you. So I'll turn it over to Kathy. And then the next person on the list is Layla Khorshadi.
Nice. Okay. So I have a lot of questions about if we choose the bridge to hybrid program and do not feel ready to return to the building when the school district decides to do so, can we move to the Watertown virtual school? So can you choose hybrid in the beginning and then go hybrid? I'm sorry, virtual.
Yep. Yeah. So what I would say is that the natural break obviously is, as I said before, is February 8th. But if there is space available, certainly we don't want to have people that don't feel comfortable, being in a situation where they feel they have to go into school. It's a little harder in the opposite direction. I think we'll be able to absorb more students into the virtual school as opposed to students in the virtual school heading back into the in-person hybrid, because we will be basing class sizes, et cetera, based upon what we start with in September. But certainly I think there's greater permeability between going from the hybrid into the fully virtual. So that's an answer. So yes, there's definitely a possibility. I would imagine that space will allow pretty easily, but certainly that is something that we would want to ensure that our families have that option.
Awesome. There was a comment about, and this may have been answered, so I apologize if I didn't hear it, about the Watertown virtual school option.
Mm-hmm.
Will it be across buildings? Will it be Watertown High School, Watertown public school teachers?
Yes. So yes, and let me explain. So elementary, obviously middle school will be middle school and high school will be high school, meaning we don't have 3 middle schools, but we do have 3 elementary schools. So we will have to determine based on numbers, if we have enough students that we could run a Hosmer grade 1, then we would do that. But if we don't, then we would have a Watertown grade 1. So it would span the 3 elementary schools. I have a feeling that that's probably more likely than not. But yes, it would be taught by Watertown Public Schools teachers. For the most part, we're hoping for a one-to-one correspondence, meaning we might have a grade 1 teacher who needs to, work remotely to teach grade 1. But no matter what, people would be within their certification areas, and we would support any teacher who might be in a different grade level. But that is the goal. The only caveat to that is, and late entrant, otherwise known as I don't have a fully developed information, is that asynchronous option. That actually is like, I have a feeling it would be more like our virtual high school. Not to get people confused, but at the high school, we have a program, we've had it for many, many, many years called Virtual High School, which you opt in and you're taught by, you could be taught by a teacher in Spain, or you could be taught by a teacher in Florida. And we have a teacher who teaches in the virtual high school. So I think it's going to be a very similar model where your content delivery might be from somebody who's not in Watertown, but it's the Massachusetts standards. So I don't have a lot of information about the asynchronous option, which is fully online, but that would be the one instance where I cannot guarantee that you would be taught by a Watertown school teacher. But the other option, the majority of students in the virtual school would be taught by Watertown educators.
Okay, great. So another question was on February 8th, those students who signed up for the virtual schooling can then opt into hybrid.
Yeah, so that's when we're going to take a deep stop and see where we're at in February and determine if, you know, at that point in time, if the circumstances have changed and people are feeling comfortable about being in person, then yes, we will reassess, you know, how many people might want to move in. But I want to make sure that people know that, you know, we understand that we will have a remote learning option till the end of the year, but there just might be the option to move into the school. That is something that you want to do. But February 8th is a much more natural place for us to do that in terms of staffing and courses.
Great. A lot of talk in the Q&A about working parents, just a real concern about the remote learning, working full time and having 2 elementary school children who are with an elderly relative, a grandmother who couldn't assist them with Zoom. What kind of education are they going to get? How do we support working families?
Right. And as I, you know, said from the beginning, you know, obviously this is not the ideal, you know, choice for anyone when all is said and done. And I understand that it's a burden for our working families. You know, one of the things I don't have anything to share specifically, but certainly I'm in discussions with the Boys and Girls Club and the rec department and the extended day program to see if there are some options to support our working families. With, you know, whether it's an extended day option or whether, you know, there might be some way to hook people up in terms of having some supported care. That is something that we're looking into, but I understand that it's going to be a challenge. I do, you know, want to explore that option of talking to families that are in that situation, whether it's better to be in the same cohort or not. But I think that one thing, and I read this in the Q&A, and I understand that it is, I'm not saying it's not going to be a challenge. It's definitely going to be a challenge. But I think with the highly structured remote learning plan, as opposed to the spring, where it was a half an hour Zoom, and then you were, as parents, you know, you bore the brunt of a lot of the work that had to be done, and the curation of materials and the finding of the books and the, you know, making sure they were on the computer. Whereas I think once we get into the routine, and it will start to feel like a very strong routine, you know, yes, you're going to need to be there to support your student, but it's not going to be the same level of intervention and sitting there right next to them to make sure that you know what they're learning so you can teach them for the other 6 hours of the day. So I'm not saying it's ideal, and I think that we will be looking at some options to support our families, but I think that the structured approach is going to be very helpful to have it not feel like it did in the spring, because I understand that was a challenge.
Edie?
Yep.
The other thing you mentioned the other day was the possibility of some kind of helpline, something of that nature, which I think for parents could be helpful, maybe particularly around technology, but that might be helpful.
Right. Yeah. So absolutely. That's, you know, whether it's a help desk or drop-in sessions or, you know, come congregate at the tent, whatever it is, to make sure that parents, if they're struggling with the technology or if they don't know how to assist their student, you know, if they don't know how to use Google Classroom, whatever it might be, that yes, we need to layer in a lot more support for our families around the technology and assisting their kids. And, you know, I said this the other night, we have a high school adjustment counselor who has started to meet with families as a support, because it's a lonely adventure to be at home with your children trying to, you know, work through the curriculum. So he's had a couple of parents now that have joined him just to process the challenges that I think everyone is feeling around, you know, COVID-19 and pandemic, you know, teaching and learning. It's hard. So we want to probably expand that a little bit more to provide those supports and networks for families. I have a feeling that as we, you know, now that the plan has been voted on, you know, I would imagine, and I've heard it already a couple of times in this meeting, you know, the idea of, and I'm not going to use the word pod, but certainly leaning on each other in terms of trying to find, you know, opportunities to help each other with some of that, you know, childcare or assistance during the day. And if not, you know, reach out to the principals and we'll see what we can do in terms of, you know, reaching out to the community for some support as well. So, but we know that's a challenge. Absolutely.
Okay. A lot of questions about schedules, like, are they going to be posted? What do they look like? I think we just need to kind of maybe post those.
Sorry, I got distracted. What was that?
No, same. No, there's just a lot of questions, like specific. Same, I'm with you. A lot of specific questions about the actual schedules, like where are they posted? The parents are really not quite clear on how much is synchronous, how much is asynchronous in each of the plans. So I think that just some clarity around that.
Yes.
I don't know if you can provide that now, but I think that we just need to know that those are questions parents have.
So please, I encourage everyone to participate in the building level parent meetings, because that's where the principals will absolutely go over the schedules. But in a rudimentary nutshell, you know, elementary, middle school, you're pretty much on, and again, not on the Zoom, but your structured learning time where you're, you know, with your teachers is, you know, from 8:15 or 8:30 at the middle school till 12:15 or 12:30 in the afternoon. And then the afternoon time is, you know, from 12:30 to 2:30 or 3 is your asynchronous time. And I'm not going to use, I have a new word. It's not a new word, but I like the idea that it's asynchronous gets a little confusing. It's applied learning. So, you know, you're taking what you're learning and you're applying it in novel and new ways, or you're doing in-depth reading or whatever it might be, but that's the afternoon time. And I saw in there a question in the Q&A about the high school schedule, and maybe that seemed a little confusing. So we're not cohorting high school students yet until we actually end up in a hybrid, which, you know, it probably won't be until November the 30th at the earliest. So they will go through their ABCD on Monday, EFG on Tuesday, ABCD on Wednesday, EFG on Thursday, and then Friday there are some built-in, like I said, the guidance curriculum, office hours, other opportunities for students to participate with their teachers. But Friday is not in that block schedule. So it's every student sees every teacher twice a week. I did see that in the Q&A.
Okay.
One more, Kathy.
Yes, and then you should go to the hands up. I think there's just a lot of questions about, you know, students that are refusing to do Zoom. So what kind of supports would look like. So I want to emphasize that students with IEPs, we are going to be discussing that specifically on Thursday night at 6 o'clock. I will be sending out that Zoom link shortly for parents that have, you know, kind of students with special needs that need some additional attention.
Right. And I think that, you know, and it happened last year, but I think it's going to be even more important this year is, you know, from the get-go, when that starts to happen, meaning a student might refuse to do the Zooms, you know, that's when, if I'm a parent, you know, I'm going to want to reach out right away to the school, to the teacher, to the principal, to the guidance counselor, whoever it might be, to make sure that we layer in the supports to nip that in the bud and try to move forward. Because there are some great strategies that we've learned now that we've had the summer to, you know, read and explore and take classes, ways to engage our students that we didn't have that arsenal behind us back in March. So, you know, I think we have far better ideas and strategies to engage the disengaged. And, you know, I get it that it's hard, but we'll figure out ways to, you know, support you and the students who just Zoom isn't doing it, and we'll figure it out. Oh, back to the hands. Anne Marie Brady.
Actually, thanks for calling on me, but my question was answered in the chat.
Oh, excellent. Fabulous.
Thanks.
Yep. Next is Elizabeth Dano.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So I have a couple of questions, and I'm going to apologize because this is the first Zoom that I've listened or joined in on, so I feel like I might be very far behind a lot of other people. So, I mean, I did chat in the question, but I just want to make sure I really understand. So my son is supposed to be starting pre-K, so that's the bridge to hybrid. So just maybe to like dumb it down. So on September 22nd, he's going to be starting, and is it going to be Zoom?
Yeah, so the pre-K, you know, they will be remote until the earliest would be October 27th. So yes, they would start in Zoom, and I know that kind of seems strange for a four-year-old, I would imagine.
Yeah.
You know, I can say that, and Kathy probably can attest to this too. We did this we had some pretty great success with our 4-year-olds in our Zoom environment, because it's just a whole different world. So yes, they would start, your child would start remotely until, you know, that first check-in, which would be October 27th. And it would be a lot of socialization and, you know, getting goofy on Zoom, and then building in some of those foundational skills that we really want our pre-K kids to have, with the hope and the goal that we're back together as soon as we can be.
Okay, and then so that would be like the 8:15 to 12-ish time frame.
So I think that's something that the pre-kindergarten, the director of our early childhood program is trying to put together. I think she's sending out a survey to families, right, Kathy? Like today?
Yes, correct. I think it should come out tonight or tomorrow, yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Smaller chunks for the pre-K students, you know, and do, again, smaller groups, but maybe more of the shifts like we were just talking about with kindergarten, but that has yet to be determined.
Okay, and that's actually perfect because that leads me to my next question, which is I haven't received one email about anything, which is very concerning to me because I've had no information at all, and it was just like you know, hearing things here and there from people is why I even heard about tonight. So is that something that I should be on an email list, or?
We will make sure that you are. Kathy?
Yeah.
Elizabeth, can you maybe just, I don't know. Can you either call Kathy, or I don't want you just to put your email address in the Q&A unless you feel comfortable doing that, but we'll make sure that we get in touch with you right away.
So there, I just want to note that I did learn from our IT department, there have been some issues with their student information system in terms of emails that I think they're addressing. I think it should get resolved, but yes, if you have a student with special needs, you haven't received my emails, you know, tell me. And same with your building principals. If you haven't received those emails, let the principal know.
Okay, so yeah, I haven't received any emails whatsoever from anybody.
Well, we will, like I said, I have your name, and I will make sure that Karen makes double checks and make sure that you're in her, and I'm sure did you sign up with, we'll find you, don't worry.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess my other question is like pricing for pre-K, is it still all the same?
No, we will absolutely be considering a tuition reduction for, you know, a reduced amount of time that we're face-to-face with you, but that's, again, stuff that we need to consider and figure out moving forward, because yes, the tuition is for a full 5-day program, and that's not where we're going to head until we're in phase 5, so we'll have to figure out how best to work through the tuition question.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep. Oh, sorry. So next, with the hands up, is Sean Van Ryn.
Okay.
Fantastic. Hey, how are you guys tonight?
Good. How are you?
Not bad. So I have a number of questions. So I've had one student successfully make his way through Watertown High School. Yay. Who's going to Champlain, which is yay. But I have an incoming 9th grader who is on an IEP, and we're wondering how, like, we've been having a bit of an issue getting any communication from the high school. And to top that off with the other questions I've kind of posted up there, we're wondering how the remote learning is going to work with the IEP, as you know, because there's a lot of services that are needed. He barely, you know, was able to pull himself through the end of, you know, 8th grade.
Yep.
And here we are now going into 9th grade, and he has no support so far.
Kathy, do you want to address that, or I can? It's up to you. Kathy?
Sorry, I was answering something in the chat, so I missed it a little bit.
So the question is IEP services and how it is that we're going to be able to deliver them in the remote learning plan. And I would go back, John, to the point of, I understand that spring was a big challenge, but again, I
absolutely.
think that you know,
and I'm not getting down on you guys at all for that. I mean, we had a fantastic support in the spring coming out of the middle school, who really, you know, really made it a successful spring. However, we understand that when you go into freshman year of high school, that's when the rubber meets the road.
So I just want to speak to the fact that it's very clear, and I've had a lot of conversations with many families this week in particular about IEP services, particularly for students who are not in our, are severely disabled students in our substantially separate classrooms, but are inclusion students, partially inclusion students, and they're concerned about falling through the cracks. But the state's been clear that we have to meet the IEPs. We have to provide the services. We have to have students making progress on their goals and their objectives that parents are able to see. And that may look different than what it would look like if we were fully in school, but that
absolutely, yeah.
But you will have the services. And I think that that was a little bit different in the spring. I think we were initially guided, by the Department of Ed to look at providing kind of like a half a day of, education. Not this fall. It should look significantly different. Our teachers are already telling us, those that worked this summer, that they've done a 180 in terms of their ability to provide real, specialized instruction virtually. And if you weren't to find that there was a difference, if you're not feeling like your child's making progress, you would let me know and we would figure that out, because your child is entitled to those services on the IEP.
And I appreciate that notion. The thing that we're kind of concerned about, though, is the fact that sorry, I'm trying to find my words to respond to you with this, but some students respond very well to the structured environment that a school provides. Not necessarily, not necessarily the being in classroom, but a structure and a clear set of expectations. And I feel that that's something that really needs to be laid out in front of a lot of the kids who are going to struggle with this remote aspect.
Agreed. And it's our job to reach out and make sure that's happening.
Okay. When should we expect some of the reaching out?
I wouldn't expect anything prior to September the 1st. That's when our teachers are first coming back. And they will be starting to put together their schedules following that. So it is going to be a little
bit guidance side of things and the people who provide the other support for the IEP people.
Guidance, I believe, work additional days, so they may be back a little bit sooner. In terms of exact schedules and what that looks like, I don't anticipate that they'd be able to provide that kind of information. I do know that at the elementary level, and I think the the middle school, and then someone chime in about the high school, we're trying to build in some times for families to meet individually with liaisons or classroom teachers in order to kind of talk about what worked, what didn't work in the springtime, so that the teachers who are newly meeting students in this fall have a good sense about what students are needing and what families are needing in terms of supports in order for this fall.
So then you are actually understanding the fact that that every student is different, and that this model is going to provide some significant challenges to those who have issues with executive functions.
Hugely, yes. That's actually most of the families I've met with this week, and I have many meetings on my calendar. That's been the group that I've been speaking with. So it's families of students who have kind of milder disabilities, not our severely disabled students, but who did struggle, in ways that maybe non-disabled students didn't in remote learning, and they want to know what's going to happen, and we are 100% on top of that. And your entitlements are just the same, so that
but it's not necessarily about the entitlements; it's about the communication too. I mean, that's been one of the pieces we emailed early, very very early on this time period, and have not received any significant information back yet as to trying to connect our son, let alone anybody else's children, with a point person within the high school. because this transition is huge, especially when you're talking about a change in status quo. I mean, you're talking about when you're talking about kids who thrive on having consistency, right? Because I mean, we all know as adults, as parents, we know kids thrive on consistency, boundaries, and understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things we try to put forward. But without the boundaries and the consistency, we're struggling because we're trying to figure out how we can support our children to step forward and embrace a middle school, which honestly a high school, which honestly I have to say was really great for my older son. And if my younger was able to be in person, it would be great also. But how do we get that same level of support and consistency?
Yep. And I think too, I would love to have you come on Thursday night to our special education.
I threw my email up there. Please invite, because we haven't seen those yet.
If I can answer it to you, because you're not alone in this.
Oh, I know I'm not.
Yeah, and you know, a couple of things come to mind is, you know, how do we wrap around our students, right, in a much bigger way than we did in the spring when it was sprung upon us, and the next day we weren't here. So we're doing a lot of work this summer with groups of teachers and counselors and other mental health folks too that have been on committees, trying to figure out a system and a structure. And that's what we're working on to make sure that it's not just attending school, but it's participating in school, it's completing assignments, you know, all of those important things. How do we make sure kids are doing that? And you know, Dr. Galston talked about grading. Yeah, grading, but we want to make sure they get there, that they feel supported, that there's a connection.
Absolutely, yep.
No, so we are working on a structure for that. I want you to know it's still underway.
Yep.
As Kathy mentioned, our teachers come back on September 1st. So, and then we have the days, but committees right now at each of the schools. We just started school-based committees too. So we're working through a lot of this stuff, but you are so not alone. And here's the other thing that came to mind. Parents have said a lot of times, can you please make sure that it comes out loud and clear to all the students, school's beginning. This is not just, you know, like just like if you're walking into that school building on your first day of school. So principals are aware of this too. So you will see in time a ramp up of like everything around school. So it becomes much more focused. So it's not just the parents saying, you know, get on the computer and all of that. It's us cheerleading it on and making the student ready to learn.
So my last and really, because I know I've just dominated a whole bunch of time. My last comment / thought to throw out there is thinking about how we can really connect the parents with the curriculum, because that's one of the downsides of, like, I love Google Classroom. Don't get me wrong. I love the virtual classroom. I'm an IT tech person. I love this aspect of things.
Right.
But I have found that the parents are kind of sliced out of the situation, which means we don't have the ability to support the teachers in a remote situation.
Very, very good point. So to that end, we've developed a system, a structure where you're going to have a weekly learning plan from pre-K through 12 that your child at the high school level for your child will receive Monday morning by 8 o'clock. Teachers will, they have a lot of collaboration time on Fridays in their schedule, and they have time to assess students based on their work that week, so that they'll develop these weekly learning plans at the high school level for Monday morning. under the high school level, pre-K to 8th grade, students and parents will get this weekly learning plan on Fridays. And it's much more streamlined versus, Zoom links here and there and everywhere and trying to find it.
Understood. You guys have had a chance to adapt that. But
and it's explicit about, for example, literacy or math, the targeted objective for that week explicitly. What are they working on? So you can support your child much better.
No, absolutely. And I totally get where that, as my son was in 8th grade, it would have been fantastic. But he's going into high school.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
you explicitly just said that that the parents are not being included into the high school plan.
No. I think that what we said was that unlike in the spring where we were really student focused with Google Classroom and we didn't send out the weekly learning plans to families, we will starting in the fall, every week, every parent will get a copy of the weekly learning plans.
Okay.
We have all of the information about every day what the students are going to be expecting. And
okay. I'm sorry. Teresa said that it was going to be middle school below. That's why I wanted to clarify.
Sorry. Middle school and below are Fridays, high school's Monday. That was the only.
Oh, okay. Cool. I look forward to seeing that because that will help us support you supporting our children.
Yeah, it definitely is a marriage between parents and all of us.
Absolutely.
Make this work. We get that.
Right. Sorry, I had a thought, but yes, I think the weekly learning plans, which are the pivotal, the key, sorry, I'm getting tired, I think, the linchpin that holds all of our programming, whether you're in the remote learning plan or whether you're in the virtual school, or whatever it might be, or if you're in cohort A or cohort B, everything is going to be anchored in that weekly learning plan, which as a parent, trust me, I've got high school kids, I think I would be lost if I didn't know, and then I don't have to worry as much because I know what they're supposed to be learning and I can check in with them as opposed to being a little bit left in the dark about what was happening. That's
yeah.
If we're
especially on the virtual side of things where we're supposed to be supporting the teachers,
yep.
the educators supporting our children. It's important for us to be able to be involved in the conversation so that we can be as supportive as we are supposed to be.
Right.
Where, my eldest before all of this and many other people before all of this went through high school without an issue and like they hit freshman year and we're like, okay, we're sitting on our hands as parents and letting them be their own people. And he's a great, strong, adjusted young man.
Okay, we're gonna move on now.
Anyways, move on.
We have 4 more. Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. And your feedback is pinpointed and on target. And we will make sure that we take that in.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to move on to Layla Khorasadi. I keep losing her. Layla,
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to explain all this to us.
Yes.
I think part of it was answered with the written questions, but I was wondering for those of us who basically can't stay home to supervise the kids.
Yeah.
I'm just curious as to how much supervision are they going to need for their assignments while they're on Zoom? As far as for planning purposes, if for example, if you can't be there, what would be the best option? How much supervision are they going to need? Or if you're going to be working with them at home in tandem, how involved must you be, or can you be sitting in the other room, basically tell them to go to your room and go on to Zoom? How will the teachers know they're actually on that Zoom meeting? Or do you have to sit in the same room? At the same time, if you have for example, if multiple children at home and you have a younger sibling, how do you keep them out so that that discipline is preserved, that it's a classroom now?
Yep. So I love that question. That's, first off, I'm curious as to how old your children might be, because that would probably guide a little bit about the answer.
So I have a rising first grader and I have a very rambunctious 3-year-old son.
Oh boy. Okay. So yes, our preschool and rising first graders, they do need a little bit more supervision than say a 5th grader. So I would say that your rising first grader, once, and this kind of goes back to John's point, once we establish those routines and you know what to expect every day, and you see those weekly learning plans, and you know, oh, from 8:15 to 8:35 it's morning meeting, I don't need to be as involved, because that's more of that social, I mean, I want you to be involved, but you don't need to be as involved as, say, when they're learning their phonics lesson, where you want to make sure that they're engaged in the phonics learning, and you might be able to support them later on in the evening. And I think you're going to gauge as the weeks progress based on those weekly learning plans. And to a point, this is a good point, Teresa, maybe we put little asterisks or indications, you know, what are the ones that might need a little bit more parental scaffolding versus the ones that really you'll be fine, just letting them be with the Zoom and making sure that they're in. My other,
Yeah, because, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sure a lot of parents are going to be in the same situation where either they're going to have to find a way to work from home to supervise this, or if you, I mean, basically, if the spring was any indication, no, it's going to be somebody else that's going to be sitting next to Zoom, or she's going to be sitting, and you know, I noticed that they would shut off the video and they're running something in the background. They're very quick learners as far as what they can do with this internet.
Yes. Yep. And yes, I would suggest just a couple of thoughts also, and we'll send out this, I just wrote this down, kind of like a FAQ for parents around, you know, how to set up your learning environment in your home. Again, I think we tried to do that a little bit in the spring, but, you know, finding it, even if you just have, they're in their bedroom, just setting up, like, you know, just a corner or an area where they have, you know, a table and a chair and, you know, the computer. It's going to make it, this is school, like this is where you go to do your school, and set up those routines, because as John said, routines are key for kids. And I think that after a couple of weeks, especially now that we are in a very structured remote learning environment, I think it's going to become very natural as to, you know, getting them to be in school. I think it was a little harder in the spring. I fully, you know, acknowledge that.
And I love the idea of the asterisks next to the classes where parents must be present, because a lot of us will be basically patching work around them. So that's a great, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
So I would keep in mind that the first couple of weeks, just to get them disciplined, there's going to need to be more structure from parents, of course, just so we can kind of set the tone, and then kind of give a little bit more independence. But
yep.
Okay.
Gradual release of responsibility is what we call it in education. You know, it's I do, we do, and then you do. And so but these are great tips for us to have for parents. Along the way.
We're thinking of doing little video clips, like of teachers describing precisely what you just asked about. You know, what should the learning be like? What should the expectations be? Those kinds of things, and we'll have them topical so parents we'll give you like a little rundown of here's some great videos to look at in preparation for the school year.
I suppose just judging by positive reinforcement, is that I know back and forthing of paperwork is basically in itself an infection risk, but I wonder if there could be a one-way letter sent from the teachers to the students with a star, with an asterisk, whatever, that you did this homework, I noticed.
Yeah.
Even if I didn't meet you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Feedback is huge. That was, again, one of the, and again, we did our best, and I think we did really well. But feedback is key. And, you know, again, it's not necessarily a grade. It's just what you said, the acknowledgement of, I can tell you worked hard on this. You're showing your best effort, and, you know, X, Y, and Z were done really well. And that makes a huge difference. So I appreciate that feedback.
Thank you.
Okay. I have another hand. Hold on. Lisa Bernier. Oh, Lisa, you have an older version of Zoom. I'm going to promote you to a panelist to allow you to talk. Are you ready?
Hi.
Lisa, how are you?
Good, how are you? I am a legal
Good.
guardian too. I have two things one question, one thing I want to say. I have a 6-year-old that's going to be in first grade, and I have another niece that's going to be starting high school. She's on an IEP, and I heard about the IEP thing, what you guys are going to be doing. I think that's great. I have a daughter that has autoimmune disease, and my mom's very sick, so I'm already automatically choosing to do the virtual. Yep. And if the numbers still keep going up and people are still getting sick and dying, I want to stay at that, because I have to think of my mom and think of other people in my family.
Yes.
But I was also wondering, like, what's their schedule going to be like? Like, is there going to be a print like schedule for each student?
Yeah. So actually, again, the virtual school schedule will be the same in essence as the bridge to hybrid. So you would have the Monday would be, for the first grader. I'm talking about the first grader only.
Okay.
Monday would be that whole group coming together, and then Tuesday, Thursday would be with the core, and Wednesday, Friday would be with the specials. So we will figure that out. But yeah, it'd be that same 8:15 to 12:15 is really when we're thinking about as a parent that's when the core instruction is taking place, or the supports, or the flash or specials.
Okay.
And I'm going to say it again because I saw this in the question out in the Q&A. We're exploring that asynchronous option. I know some families that this is going to be impossible. I fully understand that, maybe you are the parent that has to, go to work in the morning and can't be there for your kids, and you might have somebody coming in that, can't follow along. I don't know the circumstances, but
yeah,
that asynchronous option might be best, meaning you can do that 24/7. You can, schedule your family's afternoon is the educational piece, but when it comes to what we can offer with our Watertown Public Schools teachers, that's going to be in that traditional schedule from 8:15 to 12:15.
So after the 12:15, they'll get there, like the art, the music, the gym, all that stuff?
No, actually, so after the 12:15, they're going to do their independent reading.
Okay.
So that's when you want to, and you understand that independent reading doesn't have to happen at 12:15. It could be at 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
But somewhere in the afternoon, they're going to need to do the independent reading, and then the asynchronous social studies or science. And that's, again, not dependent on time. That's totally asynchronous. You can do that at your leisure, but those opportunities will be in any time in the afternoon. So
Okay.
during the day is when your child would end up in the specials or in FLES. So that's every other day. It's kind of confusing, and I know a
Yeah,
lot of
so
people
after the 12:15, she'll be working on things her own, and obviously she needs my help, she'll ask me.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, exactly.
So it's half days basically on the computer.
Yes, exactly. Half days of the more structured, scheduled blocks of time where you're in math or you're in literacy or, whatever it might be, but, and then less structured in the afternoon. But, the work has to be done. It's just a little bit less, you have to do it at 1:15. What we'll say to families very clearly, though, is try to figure out what routine works for you and stick to it. So if it's 5 o'clock is drop everything and read, then it should be 5 o'clock every day, because kids need to know when's their time to be free and when's their time to be on.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. I have a couple more hands. I'm gonna let's see here. Sorry, I struggle with managing the group. Panelist. So Lisa, do you want me to move you back into the attendees?
It doesn't matter.
Okay. You could join us if you want up here. The next person with a hand up, sorry, I got 2 more hands. Laura Siegel and then Holly. Catch them all. Laura?
Oops, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. I have a question and kind of a suggestion or request. It's I've got 2 seniors, so it's about the college application process. I've been just thinking about sort of with the delayed start to the school year, it kind of puts Watertown High seniors a little bit behind other applicants, depending on, some other districts around the country have already started school, and then, certainly other districts in our area will be starting before we do. And with this year, because so many colleges, well, really all colleges have had to go test optional, they'll really be depending on those early evaluations, those first quarter grades, to help better evaluate applicants, especially for applicants who are opting for like early admissions, which typically are due by the end of October. So, if you think about, I can't remember the exact deadline, but I think some early action or early admission deadlines are like October 15th or October 30th or something like that. And, you know, these kids will not have been in school for all that long. So I guess my question is, have you thought about this? Are you working with teachers of seniors to figure out how they might address this particular challenge? And if not, maybe, you know, when you said that teachers are coming back September 1st, maybe you can suggest that the teachers who know that they have seniors kind of reach out to those seniors and get an early read on what their application schedule looks like who's going to need evaluations earlier in the fall than others. You know, some kids don't submit their applications till later in the fall. Anyway, yeah, any thoughts on that?
So certainly this has been brought to the attention of the high school administration, actually after the school committee meeting in the last round. And I haven't followed back up to find out the specifics of how best to answer your question, but I certainly will. I don't know if anybody else in the group here, but I hear what you're saying, and I think that you're right about maybe sending something out to parents, at least kind of outlining, you know, college in this time, and you know, what are we going to do getting up to that October? It's usually November 1st, the early decision. I have a senior, trust me, I know how this goes.
Right.
He's out there on a limb too, and you know, so I think let me just follow back up with the high school administration and try to make sure they send something out to parents of seniors around, you know, this is how we will be working with your students as they go through the college application process. There really won't be much right now that is a direct intervention from the high school, but certainly I think an email that kind of outlines what that would look like is important. Luckily, you know, I know that we're starting on the 22nd, but I think, you know, 99% of districts are starting on the 16th or later. So we're not too far behind, but yes, I mean, the rest, as you said, the rest of the country has started to try to get back. But, you know, colleges are very well aware of this. And, you know, as a parent of a senior, you know, we get the letters of, don't worry, we understand. And, you know, you're right, everything is test optional, or, you know, this is a whole different realm of how we evaluate kids. But having those tips for kids would be very important right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also the guidance counselors are probably going to have to keep teachers aware of any kind of new requests coming from colleges. I've heard a little bit here and there about how some colleges might ask that seniors submit a graded assignment or something like that in lieu of standardized test scores. So, you know, teachers just, everyone's going to have to kind of be eyes open and flexible and ready to respond to a new system.
Right. We have a very strong, we have great guidance department, period. And yes, we did hire a new guidance counselor, and that person has been appointed. And I know that was a concern for some families that we did have a retirement, but we have a replacement. So we'll bring him right up on and into speed as to how this is going to go. But, you know, we have a strong guidance department who, you know, I know that I don't think they're going to miss any of those important pieces for, you know, the new college applications. But I think you're right about the fact that just a little something out to families around, parents of seniors around what they should be expecting would be great.
Great. Thanks very much.
Yep. Holly? Holly?
Am I unmuted?
You are. I can.
Hi. So most people know me as a middle school Spanish teacher or Kingian trainer. I'm going to talk a little bit about my early childhood experience. I don't know if the kindergarten question is still out there, but I have a 2-year-old niece that lives with me. She's very famous. She pops in on Zooms quite often with me. She was born prematurely, and we Zoom twice a week for 30 minutes, and she's fully engaged for 30 minutes. So I just want to try to encourage folks that are nervous. I also want to brag about my daughter. I'm heading into my 40th year of teaching. She's in her first year of teaching preschool this summer, and she has full attendance. And kids are fully engaged for a full half an hour, and are, you know, when it's time to go, they're still engaged. So I just really want to encourage folks to give it a go. I know that schedule looked a little intimidating when it says instruction, I want you to think that, you know, there's a lot of songs and chants and things going on there when it says instruction. There's a lot of name games, clapping of syllables, counting of letters in your name. So when it says instruction, there's really a lot of play going on there. So I don't want people to feel so intimidated by that. So I just really want people to really trust that the early child educators in Watertown have considerable expertise and really do know what they're doing.
Yep.
I also want to shout out Mr. Van Ryn. I will be emailing you for some strategies with my buddy.
Yeah.
That I will miss as he goes off to high school, but I took some courses this summer, so look for an email from me, Mr. Van Ryn.
Yep. Thank you, Holly, and I really appreciate your words of support for our teachers and belief in what we're doing, because I agree with the fact that I think we've said this before, that a lot of our teachers have been engaged in virtual learning over the summer, either in Watertown or outside. And again, since it wasn't a flipped switch and one day we're in school and the next day we're not, you know, there's a whole different mindset about entering in. And I think that it does make a huge difference in terms of, you know, for kids, oh yeah, okay, I got this, I know what I'm doing. And the teachers feel really confident as well. So I think, I mean, confident in the sense of they've been there and they're getting a lot of training and they're, you know, in a whole different place than they were back in the spring. So, and I know our teachers are going to do great, and I know our families will do well as well. And I know it's a leap of faith, but I do, you know, fully believe that no matter which way we were going to enter, it was going to be the best that we could for our kids.
Yeah,
so,
I also appreciate as a teacher entering her 40th year that we're starting out virtually, believe me, and that
yep.
we are all doing the best that we can.
Yep. And
thank
as
you,
you said, sorry, we're in this mutual back and forth, you and me, Holly, but as you said, I think most of our teachers this summer have been reading articles, been taking classes, been
absolutely
highly focused on, okay, you know, whether we're remote or hybrid or whatever we're doing, I got to get ready for, you know, this virtual learning. And I know, because we keep getting emails from teachers about, wow, look at this great resource, or,
yep.
well, this is what I think I'm going to do. What do you think? So I just appreciate that spirit of being, you know, getting ready, and we will be ready.
Yeah, I have been getting ready. Yep, you cannot say that I've been resting on my laurels going into my 40th year, for sure.
No, I never doubt that. So, I'm going to ask Kathy. You have your hand up. Kathy Damaris. Do you see Kathy's hand up? Yes.
I was muted. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's right.
There were just 2 additional questions in the Q&A that we did not hit. Everything else has been hit. Okay. So first was above and beyond the instruction, will there be homework assigned? And this parent has a 4th grader and a middle school student.
Dr. McGinnis, I don't have the best answer for that. I think that there may be times where a student's engaged in a project, or they might be doing something that, you know, takes a couple of days, and they might do some of that work above and beyond, but I don't have an actual answer as to what the homework situation is going to look like, because I think we're really focused on that applied learning. But that's a good question, and it's one of those ones that I will have to get more information to answer.
Awesome. And the last question, will there be honors courses in the virtual academy?
So at the high school level, so we have, and again, I think our goal in the high school, because we have, our course catalog has about 400 different course options, I swear, that we don't want to shortchange our students. So depending upon the numbers, we're hoping to either do a literal simulcast, where if you're a student, you're attending classes with your regular peers, so that you would have that calculus class or the you know, band class that you couldn't do remotely, because we're not going to have the teachers to do that. And if we end up with, you know, an English 9 class, then what we're discussing is opting into honors, so that you would then, you know, either have assignments that go above and beyond, or would get you to that honors credit. So that is something that we are looking into as well. But yeah, we want to make sure that all of our students in Watertown have equal opportunities to the excellent offerings that we have within our schools. So that's our goal.
Great, that's all I had.
So I will, what we do with the Q&A, everybody that asked, sorry, there were 109 questions that were answered. And I'm sure that a lot of the questions probably could have deserved a big, longer, deeper discussion, but hopefully you did get some information. And sorry, I'm looking at the last Q&A that came. One last question about the school gardens, yes, are still being cared for, I believe. And certainly that would be something that we could do in terms of our outdoor learning programming, but thank you for bringing that up. So thank you, Kathy, for the 109 answers, and Teresa, I know you answered several as well, and I answered 2. That's why I got distracted.
Thank you.
And John Ports has his hand up, one hand.
Yeah, we're wrapping up here, I see. So I just wanted to quickly thank all the parents and other people from the community who joined today, and recognize, from a school committee perspective, that we acknowledge that this is going to be a real challenge for many people to work their schedules, but we think it's best, and with the superintendent and the administration's recommendation, we think it's best moving forward in the way that is being proposed. And I will add too, and I think kind of building on what Holly mentioned before, is an advantage this year too, in that the extra 10 days that the state has given us. So that gives the educators in the community, the teachers, some extra time after that September 1st beginning date to really, I think, kind of consolidate and put together some really great strategies for both the remote learning and for the hybrid when we get to that. So I think that's a big plus. And I think we have a lot of great teachers that I think, as Dr. Galston said, have been kind of thinking about this already, but then they'll have a good chunk of time together to really put together a nice program. So appreciate for them too, but thank you everybody for coming.
Right. So anybody else from the panel want to say anything before I wrap it up? Okay. So I want to thank everybody. I think at one point we had about 180 people on the Zoom call. I really appreciate obviously the caring and concern and support in Watertown. And I'll identify once again, I know that people are, obviously concerned about how this is going to go. And as I've said before, we will do our best to provide all of our students the best opportunities they can have, whether they be remote or whether they be in person. That's our guarantee and our commitment to you. I will have another community forum, I believe, on next Tuesday evening, but there's a link that I sent out in my newsletter, my previous newsletter. I'll put it in the one that I just sent out today too, that has all of the upcoming forums, and please take advantage of those. And please certainly go to the coffees and chats that the principals will be holding. Kathy Damaris mentioned that on Thursday evening, she has her questions and answers for student support and special education. I do have an educator forum once again on Thursday the 20th at 2 p.m. I think I've sent the link out to teachers today. But this is an ongoing dialogue. And if you have questions, I know that there are some outstanding emails I still have to answer. I apologize. But now that I think we've gotten through this, we will answer all the emails that have come through. Don't hesitate to send an email, drop a line, come to these forums, because we don't want to leave questions unanswered and have people be, overly concerned about what they don't need to be concerned about. So thank you very much. And I'm going to say goodbye. And I'll see you all at some point soon.